bike tools. Now, I've been asked before, can I do a garage tour? And it's kind of pointless doing that, to be honest, because this is such a small working space. But what I do want to do today is go through the basic tools that you might need to strip down the Royal Enfield, for example, which is just outside. All these tools that you see here are collected over about, I don't know, the first bike I ever really tinkered with was in about 2010. Prior to that, I did a lot of collecting tools through building cars, messing with cars. So there's these tools here, there's a few further on, and I have a giant tool chest behind me which has got all sort of more car related stuff in, like socket sets, pliers, which you're going to need, clamps, and then woodworking stuff. I've got a lot of tools lying around, but these are mainly the bike specific ones here in the bike area. So just a quick overview of what's on this board. Got screwdrivers, a couple of taps, 2 are for pedals, one is for the derailleur hanger. I've got Allen keys going across. I've got a bearing puller, just a cheap one. I've got a chainring spanner, freewheel tools and bottom bracket tools in this corner, cable cutters, third hand tool, pedal spanners, headset spanners, bottom bracket spanners, should be on there, just metric ratchet spanners there, adjustable spanners, C-spanner, cone spanners there, master link pliers, chain tool, chain holder, chain whips, pin spanners, chain wear tool, those are dropout alignment tools, got chain wear indicator, 2 crankset pullers, that is also another actual bottom bracket tool, and so are kind of those as well, because that's a Tarns one and a Healy Chromatic. But you don't need all of this stuff here to get into working with bikes. You don't need this whole garage worth of stuff to start tinkering. All you're going to need is a few basics, really. I think a few basics. As you go on, you can buy more. To start out with, I think a few basics are what I needed. I think first up, every toolbox that you're going to work on bikes should have, or vintage bikes, let's put that at vintage bikes, every toolbox that you're going to work on with vintage bikes should have some form of penetration spray. This is just a 3-in-1 high performance penetration spray. I've also got WD-40, lots of it, and wire brush, that's what it's called, wire brush. So I mean, all this stuff is just used for loosening up rusted parts. You know how I've dealt with rusted parts before. It takes some time, it takes some doing, but having this in the toolbox, just spraying it over stuff before you work on it might help. Next thing I'd say is a good set of screwdrivers. Mainly if you're going to be working on the vintage bikes, a good set of flat bladed screwdrivers, because most of the attachments like pump pegs here, maybe Stirling Archer shifters, different things like that, even cable clamps came with a nice horrible flat bladed one which will round off easy. So a good set of these screwdrivers will work. You'll also find Phillips used a lot, not necessarily Posi, but there's a lot of Phillips around on old bikes as well, so a good set of screwdrivers always works a treat. That should go in there. Oh, and this one of course is perfectly not seized, which is awesome. Just remember, the newer you get with your bikes, the more likely it is that you are going to have an Allen key set, so a good quality Allen key set as well would be another addition to the toolbox. Now I think up next is going to be something to tackle the bolts with, any nuts with. This one's going to be a bit of a tricky one, because the older your bikes are, the more likely you're going to have Imperial measured nuts and bolts on the bike. Metric are obviously a later thing, so most of the spanners nowadays are metric. You can have a set of those in. They are useful to have, obviously, because they'll be used in a lot of things. But the older the bike is, the more likely it is to have Imperial, which this bike will have. I have a set of metric spanners. I have a set of Imperial spanners. I also have a little socket set that I inherited from my granddad, which is super useful for these bikes because it has a good quality set of Imperial and a good quality set of metric socket set bits, which is awesome to have. If you don't have any of those, then some good quality adjustable wrenches will suffice. Adjustable wrenches obviously can be used for a lot of different things. The only problem is they tend to wobble. And yeah, a good socket set or a good spanner set should see you around actually most of the bike. Now let's stick with spanners for a moment and talk about pedals. Pedals tend to use a 15mm spanner, but the gap between the actual pedal body and the crank arm can often be quite narrow, so you won't be getting a normal sized 15mm spanner in there. What you can do is grind down one of your spanners if you want, and then that will fit in there, or you could just buy a pedal specific spanner. It doesn't have to be a Park Tools one. This is the PW5 spanner. It's 15mm. It is a little bit rounded now, so I might have to get a new one because stuck pedals are a nightmare to deal with. This one, I have no idea if it's going to be stuck or not. I'm going to have to turn it, seeing it's to the drive side, normal direction actually, so anti-clockwise to undo, and it is pretty much seized in there. Now let's stick with this area for a second. Chains, they're important to work with. You don't need master link pliers really for old bikes. I've got this little Park Tool CT5. This has seen me through years of use, and it hasn't let me down. It's not an expensive one to get, but there's plenty on the market that you can use for taking apart and putting back together chains. This one, however, as a lot of vintage bikes will have, has this style of what would you call it? Quick link, I guess. It's just a little circlip on there that we're going to have to pop out, so that's where the screwdrivers come in useful again. Following on from that, if you do work on these old bikes, these vintage bikes of this era, you're going to run into cotter pins. It's without a doubt you're going to run into cotter pins, and you're going to have to service the bottom bracket. So these are the annoying ones because they don't really make tools to remove these anymore. I do have cotter pin press. I was lucky to find one on eBay, but there are ways to get these off without buying that specialist tool. And first off, this is where your spanners are going to come back in again, because this is a 3/16 of an inch. No, sorry, this is a 7/16 of an inch nut on the end. Now, if I was going to use my special tool, I would be taking this nut all the way off and using this. This is a cotter pin press. It was just one I found on eBay that someone had replicated, but the aim of it is to go on like so, crank that down, and it pushes the pin straight out, and you can remove the cranks that easy. However, if you don't have one of these, you're going to need a big old chisel, big old punch, a big old hammer, and a block of wood to support the bike. My wood's gone missing. I can't actually find my piece of wood that I normally have, but what the aim is to do is to support this crank arm, so when you do punch this out, you want to try and do it in one quick heavy blow that all the force goes into that nut and that pin, rather than shaking around on the bike, because if I was just to do it now, most of the energy would disperse through the frame. And you're going to need to drill a little hole into that block of wood for the cotter pin to actually press out into. otherwise it's not going to go anywhere. But the aim is to loosen this off slightly, put your punch on top, give it one quick blow coming down like so, and if it's supported, if you're lucky, that will come straight out. These cotter pins are a pain to work with. They, more often, like if the bike's been left outside and got all corroded and rusted, they're going to take some force to get out. That's why a cotter pin press is a good thing to have if you're going to be doing these bikes a lot, because you end up not mushrooming them. If you do mushroom them, they're probably going to have to be drilled out. So add big old hammer and big old chisel to the list of tools if you're going to be working on those, and a piece of wood with a hole in the bottom, hole in the top, so you can support it. And when it comes to the bottom brackets, once you've got that crank set off, you're going to be left with the bottom bracket cups to work on. Now ordinarily, what I was going to say for this, you're going to need 3 tools. One is a C-spanner to get the lock ring off of the other side. 2 is likely to be something like the Park Tool HCW11, because normally you would find a cup on here that has shallow, very shallow flats that you would hook on and unwind. That is kind of awkward to use, but it does work with those. It's better than using an adjustable. Or I was going to say something like the Park HCW4, which is this, which would normally have a big cup on here with 2 flats either side. You would hook on and unwind. So this is what I'd normally expect to see. A cup like that on there to work with the HCW11, which would go on, or a cup like this, which would use the HCW4, which would sit on and unwind. Unfortunately, this one decided to be fancy. It doesn't even use a C-spanner on the other side. Instead, it uses pins. The HCW4 does come with a pin spanner on the end, which you would normally be able to fit in these. Maybe not this one actually, maybe it's a bit small. Something like that, and unwind. Instead, for this one, what I'm going to have to use is something like these, the SPA1 and the SPA2, and they are going to fit into these slots here and probably not come undone, because this is an old bike and they're going to take a lot of force. Oh my god, it actually came undone. But that would just unwind like so to take these out. That is amazing. Another useful tool to have if you're going to be dealing with all these loose bearings is just a telescopic magnet. So you can stick it in there, hopefully not drop all the bearings everywhere, and just collect them all. While we're on the subject of bottom brackets and what potential tools you might need, what basic tools, I think one of the best things you can have, or one of the most useful things you can have, is one of these, a gauge checker, a thread gauge checker. Old bikes like this one could come in 24 threads per inch, could come in 26 threads per inch, could come in, if it's French, 35 by 1 or 1 mil pitch. It could come in different threads, and it's useful to have one of these just to check the threads in case the cups are worn, in case the headset is worn or something like that, and you need to change them out, because you don't want to be mismatching different thread patterns and getting them all cross-threaded. So that is something that's also very useful. Now I don't know if this is something you should class as something you need, but it's definitely something that's useful, and that's the cable cutter. Which one is this? This one is the CN10 Park Tool. The reason this is useful is obviously for cutting cables. Snip. If you need to cut any cables to size, this will be the useful. It also cuts straight through outer cables. Normal cable cutters, like wire cutters for electronics, won't really work. These also have a little grooves on them for crimping cables, so when you at the end come to crimp the cables together, they'll be useful. Now of course the last piece of the puzzle, that you want to get to is the headset. Every other piece of the bike I've managed to strip down using the tools I've already shown. The headset is the last one standing. This one, again, as with the bottom bracket, is different from usual. The lights changed. Normally I would say use a big adjustable, saves you buying the headset spanners, but you could also buy headset spanners like these. These are two different headset spanners, one by Park, which is the HEW15, one by Pedal Pro. Pedal Pro has more variations on it for different sizes, and normally you just hook them on and undo them like so, because there's normally two spanners on there. This one, however, is different. This one has a grip cup down the bottom, which literally just works on your grip, and the top one is a C-spanner. However, the C-spanner for the bottom bracket is going to be far too big, because you're not going to be able to get the right hook on there. So you can use a hammer and chisel to take this off, just by knocking around the sides, or find a smaller C-spanner. Now I'm super lucky here because I actually have, I think, the right tool for this, and that's this. It's a tiny little C-spanner with a little pin on, and that should just fit in there, and with the right amount of leverage support, oh there we go, it's turning the whole thing, it should enable me to undo this, and it is, but I'm turning both cups top and bottom on this, which is why the normal ones have two different, so I need to try and grip that one somehow. Okay, so actually I had to stick that in a vise to hold this cup to remove it, but that should come off now. That just unwinds, and then we're pretty much there. So to get to the end of servicing a bike and what tools you'll need. So that is everything out now. The bike is stripped. The bike is ready to be completely serviced if you need to do that. And this is what tools I used. And of course there's a beam of light coming right across what I need to film. But these are what tools I used. So to start with, screwdriver set. Always useful to have in your toolbox, along with the Allen key set, which I said would be useful for later bikes. Spanners. This spanner in particular helped me get the mudguards off, combined with a socket set. A nice socket set like that one at the back, which has Imperial and metric, will see you through pretty much 99% of the bike. I had to use an adjustable for, what did I use that for? Can't remember what I used that for, but adjustable is always useful, especially if you don't want to buy the headset spanners. We used a wire brush with some 3-in-1 high performance penetration spray. Got the hammer, got the chisel and punch, got the thread checker, we got the cable cutters, chain tool, C-spanner with the bigger C-spanner, which is here, and the bottom bracket tools. These are the important ones for the bottom bracket. Now that should see you servicing the majority of the bike. If you want to go onto the wheels, you will need a set of cone spanners, which will see you through most of that servicing. If it is a Sturmey Archer, you'll also need a 16mm cone spanner, because they would like to be different. And it's always good to have a vise. A vise is a very useful thing to have. I've got the big chunky one. You don't have to have one that big, but a vise is very useful. And I think that will see you through working on a vintage bike like that. Yeah, that's pretty much everything. Everything that you see here is what I used today. Just take it apart. I kept everything on this desk so you could see it, but that should be a good starter toolbox. I didn't delve into any of the freewheel tools because they are a minefield. If you have a look up here, that is how many freewheel tools I have. and that isn't even all of the ones that you can get. So depending on your application, depends on which sort of freewheel tool you need. And there we go. Oh, one last thing actually, because I've seen it, calipers. A good set of vernier calipers will work wonders for measuring stuff. And I believe that is where we're going to leave it today. So those are the tools I would recommend having for stripping down a vintage bike, for working on a vintage bike. Obviously the newer you get, the different tools that the more different tools that you need. But those, I think this lot should see you through working on most, like English 3 speeds, something like that. Should see you going through most of those. So as the battery is running low, I'm going to end it there. I hope this video was useful and entertaining. If you like it, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down. Leave a comment if I've missed any tools, and I'll catch you in the next video. So as I said, a lot of these tools you'll build up as you go along. This is just a good base. So if you like it, get building. See you in the next one.